Yeah, well, I think today we're seeing a big drop in brain health that we never saw before. When I was growing up in the 70s, I didn't know anyone in my family that had dementia or Alzheimer's, and my family lived in the 90s. They were Iowa farmers. And I tell people, we don't know any ancient culture that says they kept all the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters. They kept it with the elders. So it has to be our lifestyle. And the main things with our lifestyle, there's three things it takes, really main things to create brain health. Number one is you cannot think of bad diets. So nutrition is number one. You have to eat well. And our foods that we're consuming out there, the average person, just the other day, it was so funny. I had somebody say, well, why would the government not take it off the shelf if it's that bad? And I go, what are you talking about? Our government basically is run by corporations. If the corporation gives enough money, they pass it by. And so we're eating foods that are terrible.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the Anxious Health Podcast. We have a special guest with us today because he is a repeat guest. This is interview number 2. I'll make sure I link the first interview with him, but the first one was so great, we knew we had to have him back. He's probably one of the most prominent voices in the space of neuropsychology. So I'm so thrilled to have him. This is Dr. Patrick Porter. If you didn't listen to that first episode with Dr. Motley, it was phenomenal. But he has spent his life's work in this space, studying the brain, longevity, so many different things that have changed people's lives as a result of BrainTap, which is a technology that he developed over so many years of his experience. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But Dr. Patrick Porter, thank you so much for joining us again today. I'm excited for our conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me, Courtney. It's great being here.
Yeah. I loved listening to the first episode. I know I wasn't able to be on that one, but it was incredible to hear your story and about how BrainTap came to be. And so if you haven't listened to that, make sure you get the full story and listen to it. It'll be linked in the show notes. But what I'd love to start out with is getting your perspective on brain health, because in the space of natural health, and we have a lot of really educated listeners, and I would say that it's become more important. It's becoming a priority for people. They're really starting to realize that their brain health is directly tied to their longevity. And I think people are really fearful that they're going to experience symptoms of cognitive decline at a very early age, because that's really what we're seeing the trend. So in your perspective and in really your experience, where is brain health today and why is it so important?
Yeah, well, I think today we're seeing a big drop in brain health that we never saw before. When I was growing up in the 70s, I didn't know anyone in my family that had dementia or Alzheimer's, and my family lived in the 90s. They were Iowa farmers. And I tell people, we don't know any ancient culture that says they kept all the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters. They kept it with the elders. So it has to be our lifestyle. And the main things with our lifestyle, there's three things it takes, really main things to create brain health. Number one is you cannot think of bad diets. So nutrition is number one. You have to eat well. And our foods that we're consuming out there, the average person, just the other day, it was so funny. I had somebody say, well, why would the government not take it off the shelf if it's that bad? And I go, what are you talking about? Our government basically is run by corporations. If the corporation gives enough money, they pass it by. And so we're eating foods that are terrible. And then, so we have to feed our body, and this is something that I don't think anybody can argue that case right now. And then number two, people aren't moving and breathing. They don't realize that if you sit down for more than 2 hours at a time, you've actually lost 10 to 15% of the oxygen to your brain. So when somebody says sitting is the new smoking might actually be better because they get up and walk around, and our body needs to move and breathe. Moving and breathing is core to our neurophysiology, and our physiology affects our psychology. So there's no disconnection there. A lot of people talk about gut health, but there's actually 3 brains. So most people talk about the brain between our ears, which is, I like to tell people that's like a Google tablet. It basically transmits and receives information. The real brain is in our heart. We have 40,000 neutrino cells, and that brain actually controls the show, because that's why HRV is so popular now and things like that, is because the heart transmits twice as much information to the body as the body does the heart. And then we have our gut brain. When you're talking about brain health, When any one of these brains are disrupted, it's not like it's just happening there. For instance, if you have leaky gut, I can guarantee you have a leaky brain, which means you're going to have a foggy brain, you're going to have headaches, you're going to have discomfort. And that also means that biome is around the heart because it's the same thing, it's just smaller. So when you think about repairing the gut and repairing the brain, they're the same thing. And one of the nutrients that I think are missing out there is light. And that could be sunlight, seeing sunrises and sunsets, getting out, grounding. Those are really important things. I always tell people, because they always look at me grounding, and I go, next time you're at Lowe's or Home Depot, go to the electronics where they have the electrical equipment, and they have a voltometer there. Measure how many volts are moving through your body. The average person I have do that is moving between 3 and 4 volts of energy through their body while they're sitting at Lowe's. Your body should be at 0 point. And then if you had that equipment to go outside, take your shoes off, stand in the grass, you'd be 0. So the problem is that this information, we're an electrical system or light beings, and we'll get maybe more into that a little bit, but we transmit and receive light through our mitochondria. That's our transmission and reception system in the body. Of course, it shows up in a gross matter through our nervous system, but the reality is that we are biophotic beings. Everything we eat turns to energy, and that energy then restores our body. So with the brain health situation we have right now is people aren't moving and breathing. They're eating total crap, and they're doing nothing for their brain. They say the average person watches 40 hours of television a week. So I'm wondering who's watching my 40, because I'm not watching 40 hours of television. But, if you're not doing things to stimulate your brain, watching television isn't stimulating, because you're getting the pictures put into your brain, you're getting the sound. It's basically a passive way. Now, it's okay. I think it's okay to, maybe watch some comedies or a movie or something like that. But when you're watching, 40 hours, that's a job. Somebody has a job just watching television. Those are things that are going to shut down the brain. And then, of course, you could go a little bit further and say, spirituality is a big key one there. Do they have a connection to a source power greater than you? It doesn't matter to me what that is, but we need to realize that there's a power governing the universe, and that helps. And then, of course, with what's happened, still people are scared. I mean, our office, which we have a 6,000 square foot biohacking lab's got every piece of equipment you'd want to use in it pretty much. And we only have 5 of our employees back, and we hired people from around the country. So now they're not even together anymore. We used to have all 19 people in one place. Now we're all over. So that's causing some stress too. So I think that the stress that we're under is causing a lot of the brain problems that we have. And stress isn't really the problem, though, Courtney. It's recovery, because we can all handle stress. It's just, are we taking the time to recover? We can maybe talk a little bit more about that later in the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. That's such a good point to land on. I think that is a massive piece of the puzzle that, like you said, we're designed for stress. And so what is it then for the recovery part that's missing? Is it that we're getting pinged by EMF and things when we sleep, and it's keeping our immune system and our nervous system triggered? Like, why do we have this inability to fully recover?
Well, I think that you mentioned a few that are good, and we'll call those back. Those are all true. The main thing is that people just want to go, go, go. They don't realize that, for instance, I'll just use one that I know people do all the time that are listening. You go to yoga class and you do the yoga, then they're going to do the yoga nidra and lay down on the mat, and people get up and leave. Well, I travel through India all the time. I'm partners with Ames Bhopal. Actually, we were just Researchers of the Year last year in India. And what we do is we teach ancient traditions, and we show them how we can make modern technology out of it. And what happens is this stress that we're under is, you need that time, because yoga is stressful for the body. It's not relaxing. You think it's relaxing, but your brain has got a lot of stress. This creates neuroplasticity, which is something we need, especially as we age. We need more neuroplasticity, because through our life, we have something called neuropruning, which means our brain is always unwiring the brain to make it easier and more efficient as we age. So if we don't stress the brain and then recover the brain, it will never reconnect that neuroplasticity just won't stay awake. It basically, the power in the brain will go down, and we can measure this through things like WADI or other EEG devices. And so when we think about yoga nidra in India, they'll tell you the most important yoga pose is what they call the corpse pose. That's where you're just laying there after the yoga. That's when your brain rewires. And the same thing's true when you sleep. With 2/3 of the world not sleeping, the only time your brain detoxes, because it has to be thoughts, traumas, or toxins, one of those three. So if they don't get level 4 sleep, the brain never detoxes. There's a part of the body that I talked about in the first episode too, called the glial lymphomic system, that if you don't activate level 4 sleep, you are not going to detox the brain. I don't care what you take as a supplement. If you're stressed out too, if you're not dealing with your stress, your body's going to stay in a sympathetic drive mode, which is fight or flight. So you're not going to get the benefit of all the nutrients you're taking. So that's why there's got to be that balance. All three are important, but I think, of course, nutrition, you can't outthink a bad diet. So you got to eat right, you got to move, you got to breathe, you've got to do some kind of mindfulness training. We choose light, sound, and vibration because we know it proves that the brain can change, and we can actually train the brain to have more brainwave activity as we age, what we've been finding. And this might shock some of the people out there, but when we measure brains, and we've measured over 35,000 brains in the last 11 years, and what we found is that about 90% of the people we see are over 50% delta while they're awake. Now, what does this mean? This means that there's a lot of inflammation in the body, more importantly, in the brain. So the brain is saying, I know how to fix this. We need to go to sleep. But most people, what they will do is they'll use their biological system, like they'll get coffees, teas, and sugar, and things like that that stimulate the body. And that can keep us going for a little bit, but pretty soon you got to pay the piper. Yeah. And when you do, that's when you find out where the body is breaking down.
So do you think that there are a number of people that, because I know of a lot of people that are sleeping at night, but I don't know that they maybe understand the quality of their sleep, because during the day, everything's dysregulated. Their cortisol is dysregulated, their blood sugar is whack, their hormones are sideways. And they're like, why sleep at night? I'm getting rest. So what's the missing piece? Like, why are like talking about that stage 4?
Yeah, we did a study. We did a study in Australia, Western Australia, with coal miners. These guys were in bed on average 8 to 9 hours a night. But they were, and the average person in the study, we had to do a 2-week washout. Baseline. So we were having them wear scintigraphy watches, which basically measure sleep and sleep zones. And the average person in the study, before the study, 1.5 minutes of deep sleep. They were in bed for 9 hours. So a lot of people have a misconception about sleep. It's not about time in bed. Now, there's obviously you got to have some time. What I know to get maximum sleep quality and balance and regulate those neurohormones and things like that, one thing most people don't know is that your gut makes those neurohormones, but your brain has to be in the right brain state to activate it. So, for instance, if you want to activate acetylcholine and those feel-good kind of neurohormones, you got to have alpha, which means you got to do something that's fun, relaxing, maybe a conversation with a friend, a meditation, a mindfulness session, a yoga class, some way to activate that brain. If you get to theta, you're going to activate GABA. GABA is a precursor to DMT. So if you want to have those kind of spiritual mountaintop experiences, that's why people have those during meditation, if you can get into the theta realm. Delta is what activates that serotonin. And most people have too much serotonin, which is amazing to me that people get serotonin uptake inhibitors, because it's not the serotonin that's a problem. It's the use of the serotonin. It's toxic in the body. It's overloaded. They don't have enough. So when you think about sleep, I tell people all the longevity studies show 6.5 hours is the magic number. People that live the longest sleep 6.5 hours, but they get a minimum. Now, a minimum, you can always have more, but a minimum of an hour deep sleep and a minimum of 2 hours REM sleep. If you can't measure that, then you don't know. You could be in bed for 9 hours and not get any sleep. So things like the Aura Ring or the BioStrap or the Whoop, now, you don't have to use them all the time, because some people get so addicted they have a bad day if they don't get a 90 or 85 or something like that. But it's good to measure, especially when you do something that you think is wrong. Maybe in the evening, like you cheat a little bit on your health diet or whatever you're doing, and then instead of guessing, you can see what that did to your sleep cycle. And you'll probably find that it kept you in a more of that beta brain, which is not what you want when you sleep. You want to go through those cycles when you sleep so that you can hit that deep level for sleep and activate the glial lymphomic system so you can detox the brain.
Yeah, that's incredible. What are your recommendations if somebody doesn't have a tool like an Aura Ring or some kind of device where, because we all love data, and I feel like like you're right when you say like the Aura, like, because you do. Like I posted my sleep score the other day because I was sick like a week ago. I mean everything, it was so bad. It was basically like, don't even get up, don't even try to do anything today. But if somebody doesn't have a device that they're tracking, like what are best practices to ensure that you do get some of the good stages of sleep and you're activating these different neural pathways and everything else?
Well, one thing is to go to bed with a process. So most people have a process. If you're sleeping well and your Aura Ring or your Whoop or whatever saying, hey, man, you're getting in the 80s and 90s, then you don't need to change anything. But if you don't have those devices and you first thing you do when you get up in the morning is you need coffee, I'm going to guarantee you haven't had a good night's sleep. Because even though I like a cup of coffee or so, but I do that after 10 o'clock in the morning. And the reason is that if you drink coffee first thing in the morning, then your brain doesn't make its cortisol, its norepinephrine, and all the things that it needs to trigger hyperactivity. Because we're built to be more mobile, active in the morning, get up, get out there, start hunting and gathering, doing what we need to do. And these bodies really haven't changed in 200,000 years. So, I mean, the world has changed a great deal, but these bodies haven't. So they're designed for the Serengeti, and we're running around here in houses and doing our thing. So that's one. But at night, right before you go to sleep. So I recommend people start doing breath work. If you don't have any devices or you're scared of devices, then these are simple breathing techniques. So anybody can do them, and you can get more information, on YouTube if you need to. But the one to go to sleep with is called the 4-8 breath. Most people have never exercised their nervous system. So they basically just, if they feel good, they feel good. If they feel bad, they feel bad. They don't realize that you can flip the switch. You can choose to be happy or you can choose to be sad, just like an actor or an actress would do. They know how to turn those switches at night. So when you breathe into the mental count of 4, you're triggering the sympathetic system. So you might feel when you first start doing this, if you've never meditated or relaxed or done any breath work, you might feel a little anxious. That's okay. Use a little mindfulness tip. Just kind of let that wave of anxiety wash over you, and then slowly breathe out to the count of 8. When you do that, you're turning on the parasympathetic system. Mm-hmm. And what I find is when somebody practices this for even 4 or 5 days, pretty soon they have a rhythm going right before sleep. Because the worst thing that can happen to a person is right before bed, they watched some kind of mad, crazy show that got their brain thinking of murder or, something like that. And
Dateline 60/60 people.
Yes.
Yeah. Who you are.
Yeah. People who watch the news right before they go to bed, they usually don't sleep very well because the news doesn't give any solutions. It's only presenting problems. And our brain loves solutions. So it doesn't mind problems that it can solve. But when you give it a problem it can't solve, it's like having too many files up on your computer and it just starts spinning. And that's what happens when we go to bed. So when you do this 4-8 breath, you can then, once you get comfortable doing that, you can kind of do what they call a body scan. If you've ever done yoga, you just kind of scan your body and you become aware of the sensations and feelings. You might start feeling the muscles unravel almost like rubber bands or something. Now, a lot of people think, again, there's 3 brains, but really every cell, you are infinitely intelligent. I mean, every cell has its own organism, its own intelligence. So when we relax the body and get rid of the excess stress, now we've allowed the brain to do its work. And the brain does most of its work at night when we go through that sleep cycle. That's why it's so important we get rid of the stress first. So we get out of that beta brain. Some people take up to 4 hours before they get into their cycles, which means they only sleep 3 or 4 cycles. The more cycles of sleep you get, that's why this breath work kind of thing, right before you go to bed, it will accelerate those sleep cycles and you'll get more deep sleep. The average person in our study with Australia, in 3 weeks, the people using our BrainTap headset had a 70% improvement in sleep scores. They went from 1.5 minutes to almost an hour of sleep within 3 weeks. Those that used our app, it took 6 weeks to do the same thing. And the neat thing was that these guys, unfortunately, they were all guys, and they were pretty much alcoholics because they'd go to work drinking and things like that. And so we started with 60, we ended up with 42. And I said, because I had to guarantee they wouldn't drink during the study, you can't do much with the brain if you're intoxicated. I mean, if you choose to drink, that's one thing, but if you're drinking every night, I don't think that's a choice. Most of them said they have to do it to go to sleep. So we showed them that's why they were only getting 1.5 minutes sleep, is because the body won't even start the sleep cycle till the alcohol is digested and metabolized. The same thing's true with food, by the way. I always tell my clients, I go, you remember when you were younger and your mother said, I'm going to send you to bed without eating? I said, that's a good thing. Every once in a while. So
Yeah.
if you get home and you only have to make it, an hour before you go to bed, it's better that you maybe drink some kind of protein drink, something that's going to metabolize and digest quickly, and then get you into that. And by doing the protein, you're going to put your body in fat burning mode, which is going to give you more energy for your brain, because your brain uses a lot of energy while you sleep. Most people don't know this either. You have children, so there's been times when they were so tired they couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
That's because their brain didn't have the energy to sleep. Most people do not have the energy to sleep. So what happens is they lay down, even though they've been eating all day, it's not nutrient dense food. So the body's saying, get up, go scavenge. You've got to get some food in me. You got to get me some nutrients. I can't survive on this food. So they're literally robbing Peter to pay Paul all night long, and they're having this struggle. And if they would a lot of people I tell, hey, just do a great scoop of protein right before you go to bed, and you'll find that you won't wake up at night anymore. And a lot of people go, wow, how'd that work? I go, that's because you triggered the glucagon response, and your cells opened up and released the fat cells into your lymph system, and then your cells used them when they needed them. That's the energy. The body has it there. It's just nobody uses those triggers in the body to release the fat, and the body just keeps storing that fat up. And the other thing too, Courtney, just one more thing before we go on so people understand. The body too, every time you have a stressful event, there's something really bizarre that happens. I don't know about you, but I've never met a client yet that had a carbohydrate deficiency, right? They've never come to, that never happens, because your liver literally houses 25 grams of sugar. Every time you have a stress response, your liver dumps it into the bloodstream. And if you're sitting at your desk, or you're driving your car, or you're looking at your phone, or you're watching a movie, you're not doing anything. The muscles don't need it. The muscles are already full of energy. So they're sitting there. So what is the body going to do? It's going to cause the body to produce fat cells to store the toxic waste from that sugar. Now that's almost a candy bar. So when you think about it, every stressful event is like eating a candy bar. So that's why when people tell me I'm on a diet, and I go, what are you doing for your stress? I'm just relaxing. No, you got to do something very specific, because the body is trained. You're stressing out. And at night, if you wake up in the middle of the night, that's usually your primitive brain either telling you need oxygen or food. It's trying to keep you alive. It's not trying to prevent you from sleeping. So its only job is to keep you alive. So if we work with our body, that's the other thing. If you can get the body releasing the right amount of fat at the right time. If you do it too fast, of course, you can have a toxic reaction. But if I've seen thousands of people in our clinics that I would tell have a scoop of protein before going to sleep, and it solved all their sleep problems. If that was the problem, if we tried some other things, and it's usually because they don't have energy in their brain.
That's so remarkable, because there's adults too. I mean, it's children, it's like really obvious. And we think like, gosh, they just can't calm down. We think it's an excess of energy, but like you said, it's actually a deficiency of energy, and their body can't settle, doesn't have the resources that it needs. And what I'm taking away from this is that the choices and the habits that you have all day are what's setting you up for the sleep that you're going to experience, the quality of sleep you'll experience at night. So if you have dysregulated blood sugar, like that seems to be a big thing for a lot of people. So like the protein piece is so important, because a lot of people are drinking caffeine, and they're maybe fasting, and they're not metabolically efficient, and they've got a
Right.
heavy toxic burden, and so they're very insulin resistant. And then at night, their cortisol is like, having to spike up in the middle of the night because their blood sugar's, dropping, and they can't regulate. So then it would make sense that your brain can't do what it's trying to do because the rest of your body's trying to keep you alive because your blood sugar is all over the place.
Right. Yeah. And when I every once in a while will do one of those 3-week blood tests just to see what's happening. I didn't do it during the holidays because I didn't want to shame myself. But it's amazing to me at night. Sometimes my blood sugar would peak, so I must have been having a dream that like I don't remember it. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I still have a good sleep score, but I have these peaks while I'm sleeping. I'm not doing anything but laying there. So it's amazing if we could monitor these things in a safe way. People would know, like if people would realize, hey, I'm eating 2 pieces of white bread, what that does to their sugar. The worst thing you can do for your brain is eat sugar. If there could be one thing that if I could have a magic wand and wave it past people who are scared of dementia, it just take away their need for sugar, and most of that would go away because the brain just it gets fooled. It thinks that sugar is good, and the brain gets the first cut of everything. So it goes in and then it creates a toxic load, and they're already not sleeping, so they're not getting rid of those toxins. It just keeps building up and building up. So
Yeah.
that's why, like, also maybe cutting back a little bit on the food. Of course, most Americans overeat anyway, and now the world, because you follow the fast food companies and you see the serving sizes increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so interesting. I mean, they're saying now, that dementia is like type 3 diabetes. It's just years of chronically elevated blood sugar, and it damages the brain. Like it's, we think that it's just a metabolic issue. We don't ever think the ramifications that that's having on our brain. And I think that's definitely a heavy hitter. What else do you see, as far as preserving brain health? So, because I want to talk about BrainTap and the technology, but a lot of people are trying to make the lifestyle changes, trying to clean up their diet, limiting exposures to dirty electricity and things like that. But as far as, because I think that one of the biggest pieces, and you can maybe add or take away from this, but our devices, like our phones and technology, I mean, we live in front of screens that, when we talked about like neuroplasticity, like we are training ourselves subconsciously by constantly scrolling, opening the same apps. I mean, they've tracked people with the same patterns. They'll go to like email, Instagram, whatever. And it's like they don't even think about it, but they're now habitually doing it. But what is that doing to our brain? Like, are we getting dumber? People think training your brain, and I mean, maybe this is like very remedial of me to even say, but, I'm thinking like crossword puzzles and like, things that like you see people pick up the newspaper and they're like trying to do things, but we're talking about something a little bit different here. So talk to me about what it takes to train your brain so that you don't get in a position where you are now subconsciously almost like dumbing down your brain to just a survival status.
Yeah, there's actually been research showing that people don't remember things the way that we used to. When I was growing up, I knew everybody's phone number. Mine was 32807. We didn't have all the numbers we have today. And so everybody knew those numbers. Now I don't, they're in my phone. So what they do now is they say that and kids are having the same problem. They store where that information is located, not the information. So that's very different.
Yeah.
It's like we all have this Dewey Decimal System in our brain, and we know where to go get it. They call those state dependent memories. We used to have them only occasionally, when you'd lose your keys and you'd backtrack over where you had your keys until they triggers the memory of having them. But I think what's going on here is that there's a few things that people can do. If you are stressing about it, then it's time to do something about it, because the worst thing you can do is stress about it and not do anything. That's really bad for your subconscious. So what you do, the first thing you would do is the things we talked about for sleep. But then after every meal, if you can, go for at least a 10 to 20 minute walk. Because what happens is now you're exercising the brain at the right time. You've got fuel, you're walking. not doing heavy exercise. You do that, 3 or 4 times a week, whatever you want to do. And I do believe in muscle building. Like we do a lot with katsu and things like that with people that can't move much, the blood flow restriction bands and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you need to drive, you need to keep the body moving. And if you do it right after you eat, the nice thing is it boosts your metabolism too. So eating boosts your metabolism, walking then doubles that. Now, when you get home from that walk, take a minimum of 5 minutes to just sit and do some breath work. Just acknowledge your breath in and breath out. That's going to reset your neuroplastic change. Now, for those that don't have that much time, after you eat, then you're going to have to take some time either in the morning to wake up a little bit early and do something to get your brain going. And you can do that with a breath called breath of fire, which is a rapid breath through the nose that will stimulate cortisol, neopinephrine. It's a kind of a breath for digital coffee, if you will. That's what we call our 10-minute sessions. But if you do that breath, it's going to wake up the brain. And that's going to get you going in the morning. And if you can, the longer you can go without drinking coffee. Now, what I tell people is if you have a problem with getting rid of coffee, try like peppermint tea, which is a stimulant. It's also a blood cleanser. So if you do the peppermint tea first thing in the morning, you get that hot beverage, put some stevia in it or something like that. That's going to balance your blood sugar. Most people don't know that, but stevia will naturally balance your blood sugar. So if those that are having trouble drinking their water, even I tell, just put 2 or 3 drops of stevia in it and make it a little sweet, but that's going to balance your blood sugar. It's not going to spike it. They tried to take it off the market several times because it's just a plant, but they, so the problem. And then I think the main thing to do is any periods of high stress, like if you go work out or if you had an argument or is to take some time right afterwards. It's important you do it as quickly as you can right afterwards, because even in those moments when you thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to you, your brain is trying to rewire. And if you just go on to the next thing, it sometimes can trap. There's a book called Your Body Keeps Score and, the emotion code and those kind of things. We want that energy to flow through the body, not get stuck in different, there's also a saying the issues are in the tissues because the people will, you'll get those psychosomatic problems throughout the body. So when you sit down right afterwards and never dwell on what happened to you, what I always tell people is, always choose 3 different realities that you would prefer it to be. If there was an argument, instead of saying, I could have said this, just visualize doing those things. And what will happen is your brain will start creating choice mechanisms for you. So if that same situation comes up for you, you're going to be able to make a decision. And this has to do with neuroplasticity because the neural pruning happens when you have stress. It starts shutting down the brain. So if we don't activate that neural pruning, the brain will once those neurons lose blood flow and circulation, they don't come back on until we have a super stimulating situation, like maybe taking a psilocybin or having an ayahuasca trip or something like that might activate the higher regions of the brain that have been shut down for years because of stress or maybe even a trauma.
Yeah. I mean, I just imagine there's so many people just in life, like relationally, that, if you have a toxic relationship or a job or something that's keeping you constantly on eggshells where you're just fearful, then like that's activating, that's got to be training your brain to stay in a certain, pathway almost where it's just self-preservation. And so it's limiting your capacity to recover in that way. I mean, that's happening to so many people. I mean, I just see that across the board. And I'm even seeing it in children. And it's like very alarming with kids too, because I just think, what is this going to look like for them when they are 40? Because they're 8 years old and they're already living in these patterns where their brain isn't even able to have any flexibility whatsoever. It is like stuck in one position of just trying to keep them alive.
Right. Yeah. We need to be human beings, so we got to be out there being whatever we want to be. Sitting behind a computer screen is okay. When we do scans on people's brains after they play a single shooter game, we did some work with the Dallas Cowboys. They have a a cyber division that plays football. Like if they're going to play another team, they play them all week. And there's actually more betting done on that than on the other. I didn't believe it. But these guys, not this group specifically, but in general, these guys playing these games all day, they will wear diapers. They'll just eat junk food all day. They'll stimulate with Coke and different, caffeinated drinks and things like that. And their brain looks like crack cocaine, like they just did.
Oh my God.
And so like my grandson who comes over and wants to play a computer game, I'll say, Eli, let's scan your brain, because we have the devices here. So we and it's a little neuro check. It only takes 5 minutes. I can check his brain. And I say, okay, play for an hour. I'm going to show what it's like. And then I show him. I only had to show him that a few times. I said, so you get to play an hour, then you go do a BrainTap session. And then it gets it back, because the stress is okay. Like you're saying, looking at the screens, like I'm looking at a screen right now, there's over 1 million pixels.
Wow. My
subconscious is trying to predict every one of those pixels, even though I can't consciously do it. It's kind of like that movie Rain Man when Dustin Hoffman says, 1,274 toothpicks or whatever. And he goes, how'd you know that? He said, I counted them. Well, our brain is counting them all the time, but they're changing all the time. And when you talk about EMF, the problem is, and I'll just put this in perspective for everyone, if you don't get to sleep before 10 o'clock at night, you don't make as much melatonin. You make twice as much melatonin between 10 and 12 as you do afterwards. If you don't get to bed before 11 o'clock, your liver doesn't cleanse. Your liver cleanses between 11 and 12. Now, how does your body know that? It's because of our pulsing star that tells our body what to do. It's light that's instructing our body. That pulsar is telling our body what to do. Now, when we're out of sync with that, when we're up later and we're not doing the things, when in ancient times, for instance, if you and I were out hunting and gathering, and I might be out hunting and you might be out gathering, or vice versa, we come back to the tribal tents, we're going to see a fire. Now, most people don't realize that fire is burning at 10 hertz frequency. It's bringing their body down to alpha. It's something that, and it's emitting infrared light. So what's happening is, just like putting on a red light capsule or going into a red light sauna just before bed, relaxing all your muscles, you're sitting by the fire. But the other benefit is, and most people have probably had this experience if you've ever been on a romantic getaway, you start burning a fire and things get a little frisky, because acetylcholine is the feel good. That's when you're falling in love. That's the one that we create. That's why people say they love the ocean. Because while you're near the ocean has a 10 hertz frequency. So the brain every cell of our body has mirror neurons. That's how epigenetics works. It's vibrating and resonating with energy. It's something outside of it triggers it. In every cell of our body now, in 2003, I think I mentioned this in the other one, but I'll just kind of do a short review for people. In 2003, when they mapped the human genome, they didn't. That was 1%. So I tell people, could you imagine your finals happen, you answer 1% of the questions, and you tell the instructor, I passed? No, they didn't map the human genome. What they did is they figured out, hey, this person's going to have blonde hair, this person's going to have brown hair, this one's going to be bald, this one's not, whatever, your eye color is going to be this and that. But those are the fixed things that we don't get to change. But the 99% in 2018, they realized that those change every 40 seconds. And it's based on something called the epigenetic system, but it's done by biophotic exchange. Our cells are literally instructing the cells around them what to do, because we're a community of cells. So in this community is working together. So when our body's under stress, it doesn't stay in one area. It resonates through the whole body. That's why some people get stressed, they clench their teeth, and some people will close their eyes and, or ball up into a fetal position. And so what we're talking about here is, think about EMFs right now. Everything pulsing, that the sun, our body responds typically to anything 0.05 to 100 pulses per second. That EMF tower is pulsing a signal to our body at 50 million pulses per second. So our body's going, what is it? What do I need to do? What instructions are you giving me? It doesn't know that it's man-made. It's never seen it before in the history of the earth. And here it is. And so some 20% of people will have a visceral reaction. I mean, I know some people that will pass out if they don't do, like where I'm standing right now, I have a grounding mat, because I do a lot of work with Clinoper and earthing, and I really am a believer. And we put these under all the computers at the office. So anytime while you're working in front of the computer, just reach over and ground yourself, and you'll get rid of that energy, because it's all about recycling that energy. But most people don't realize that they've never touched the earth in years, and they're running around, like I said, with 3 to 4 volts of energy, interfering with every cell's, that communication. Think of it like you're going through Texas and you're in between 2 radio stations. That's what's happening to every cell, because you got this interference in the middle of that communication. So once you clear, that's why when people go outside, and especially in the morning or in the evening, watching a sunset and sunrise, their body naturally calms down, because especially if you're on the sand or on the dirt, just get near the earth and your body is going to do what it naturally does. It's going to calm you down.
Man, this is so good. I'm learning so much. I mean, everything is information. I think that's what keeps resonating in my mind, is that everything is information to your cells in your body. And so it's going somewhere, it's communicating something and creating a chain of reactions. And so that's where I think people get so stuck, because we're so causative. It's just if, we do this or eat this, then this happens. But our bodies are so dynamic in that it's always receiving information that we don't even realize. Just sitting here, I'm thinking okay, in my mind, I'm just doing the interview. But like you said, we're processing so many other things that we're in our subconscious is managing that. And so I'm not even aware of it, but it's all creating, either a positive or a negative chain of reactions in the body, where it's either trying to repair or it's now setting us up for repair later. And depending on all of those stressors that we're accumulating during the day, if we don't have the right practices in place to let our bodies recover, we carry this deficit over and over and over. And that's where we see this chronic perpetual disease state in people. And it makes sense that it would be happening in younger populations, because the stressors are growing. We're doing nothing about it. We're not even barely being, we can barely handle the basics, right? Because our food, even if we're trying to eat well, it's still not great, right? Our water is contaminated. So there's a lot there. I want to ask you about specifically how BrainTap can be utilized for people that want to access something that's going to help them in that recovery, because we do have a number of listeners that are, like I said, so highly educated, and they know the value of investing in their health. And so you've developed this technology that is so incredible and so accessible for people, and it can be used on children, it can be used on adults, and it doesn't even take a long time. So explain to our audience what BrainTap is, the technology, and how it's going to improve that recovery that they can experience for their bodies.
Yeah. First, let me kind of frame it this way. We know that people who are optimistic, positive, they look at life as a series of challenges. They're going to be healthier. Their immune system is going to function better. This is one of the areas we really focus on, positive psychology with BrainTap. Now, the person that looks at life as a series of threats, and thinks the world's out to get them and watches the news every night. I hate to beat a dead horse, but the worst thing you can do for your brain, I should say, is watch the news.
Yeah, watch the news. We're going to put that in all caps in the show notes. Don't watch the news.
Right. It would be different if it was news. Your neighborhood has more positive news that could fit in an hour. They have to scour the whole planet to get us an hour of bad news, and just to scare us so we can watch commercials that are terrible. So now let's talk about BrainTap. So what we want to do is, we have sessions without words. So if people are wondering, gosh, do I have to listen to this guy all the time? We have 67 different people that actually have read their scripts, their motivation. They have to be positive in nature. I've screened them all. We have things all the way from relationship improvement to stopping smoking to weight loss to whatever. So you pick it. There's 47 different items that we can work with. And that's what the 4,000 clinics we have out there, they kind of dictate what we create, because they're seeing the people on the ground level. And then we look at, okay, how can we get people into that state? When you talked about the subconscious and all of that, Bruce Lipton says that 95% of our biological system is run by our subconscious mind. So that means we're not consciously in control of it. We're busy being busy. Our body is digesting, metabolizing. Our body's doing what it needs to do while we're doing what we need to be doing. So, but most people try to change that 5%. That has nothing to do with all those activities. When, the old commercial, man, I could have had a V8, right? Well, that happens to people all the time because stress bumps those good choices out there. So what we did is, how can we get somebody in that state? So if you were to look at our device, if you're listening to this, and you haven't seen the BrainTap yet, obviously in the show notes we'll have BrainTap. You'll have a link to that. And it looks like a virtual reality headset kind of thing, but it's not virtual reality. You close your eyes and there is light flickering anywhere between 0.05 to 100, depending upon the session. And you heard me right, all the way up to 100, because in our dementia study where we took women 55, 65, every one of them got off the dementia scale in 6 weeks. We had to have them train at gamma. And gamma is the bass drum of the brain. So if we don't have at least 5% gamma, our brain's going to dysregulate too. So it's a little high frequency for most people, but when your brain's slowing down. Now, what we found was most people cannot meditate. And when you do meditate without using a device like BrainTap, is that you're shutting down about 30% of your brain. We've seen that over and over again. And that's why people fall asleep or they get their monkey mind involved. What we're doing is we're feeding the brain energy. So right now we're using light that is flickering and your eyes are closed, but through something called photobiomodulation, the cells are different than people. They don't hoard the information. They don't go buy a storage unit to hoard the energy. What they do is they share that energy with the cell beside it. So basically, as soon as that cell is full, every cell has something called a chromophore. And this is a little battery, and it fills up on light, sound, and vibration. You know, we've all been to concerts or we've been to a friend's house. They start playing our favorite music. We'll start moving and dancing because the music actually wakes up our cells and fills our cells energy. So we wanted to get light into the brain because when we activate the optic nerve, 100% of the brain has to stay vigilant. Doesn't mean it's all being activated, but it has to stay vigilant, which means it's not going to go to sleep like you do. When you close your eyes, again, 30% of your brain is going to go off because you're not using the visual cortex anymore. So that's why we can sleep. So we don't want you to sleep during BrainTap, although you get the sensations and feelings like a good nap, but you haven't really slept. Now, we've also, remember, we want to get energy into the brain. The eyes have the most mitochondria of any other area of the body. Now, not the most, just the most condensed. So the most are in the brain. So, but most people don't realize this, but your eyes actually absorb and transmit light. And just to put in perspective, you've probably been sitting on the couch watching television. Somebody's looking at you from behind. You go, somebody's looking at me, and you turn around and somebody is looking at you. That's because your eyes actually project light when you look at somebody. And they did a study during COVID that showed people who are optimistic actually transmit 200 times more light from the mitochondria than the people who are pessimistic, the ones that look at life as a threat. So that's why they said, hey, you need to be optimistic. We want to turn on our light, not shut it down. So we were looking at how could we get more energy into the brain, because the brain will only improve while it has nutrients. And like I said, light is one of the most underprescribed nutrients. So we put it in the ears. There's red and blue light in the ears. Now, those lights actually flicker at 470 and 650 nanometer light, but they also pulse. They pulse every 2 minutes at a different Auger frequency. And that's instructing our body to balance. There's 7 unique frequencies in the body. Dr. Nogier, who is the founder of auricular therapy, he's the one who came up with those frequencies, if you will. And so we use those because some of our doctors were using lasers to do it. And I thought, wow, how can we do it without the doctor having to put a laser up to their ear and, spend whatever, even if it was only 5 minutes, that's still 5 minutes of the doctor's time. They could be doing something else. So we're always looking for how we could help them out and also make our device more useful. Now, we use, as far as sound goes, we use light. We use the light, but in conjunction with that light, we call it biocular because it's like binaurals, except we're doing it with the eyes. And then those are matching the sound frequencies that are going in through the ears. So we have binaural beats, isochronic tones, and we have solfeggio frequencies now on the audio track. So those frequencies can help us activate different regions of the brain. So when somebody says, gosh, Dr. Porter, why do you have 2,000 sessions on the BrainTap? I go, because every time you listen, we want you to do something different. We want you to have neuroplasticity. Some people will get their favorites, but like we have a series, just to put it in perspective, we did a series for Napoleon Hill's group, Think and Grow Rich. And so we have 17 sessions based on that book. So it's like if you listen to those over the next 17 days, it would be as if you read the book, because all the highlights, it's like a book review, while you're reading it, because this is a way to create super learning. or you could listen to one of our 54 emotional eating program sessions, like how to turn diet saboteurs into diet saboteurs into diet supporters. So we have all sorts of different things, from stopping smoking. I used to run a lifestyle improvement franchise. So we did a lot over the years. For 27 years, that's all we saw in the mental health space.
I was going to ask, like, what's like a cool story of that's maybe like, some people thinking like, okay, I want to keep, my recovery up and my brain sharp and, my inflammation down and all of that stuff. But like, what's something that like you've seen that people probably wouldn't associate like as a positive or an outcome of using something like this, that maybe they wouldn't even correlate, in their mind? Like, because I feel like there are just so many different scenarios where this could be helpful.
Yeah, if they did hashtag BrainTap on any social media site, they'll see thousands of people telling stories about it. But I think that what I see more than not are the normal everyday things. But every once in a while, I had a woman come in, and she had been diagnosed that she wasn't going to live for 6 weeks. And I'm like going, well, what are we going to do for you? I said, I can't guarantee, we can guarantee treatment, but we can't guarantee results, right? And she says, well, I just came here because my mental state, and a friend of mine knew about you, wanted me to do so. We had her start using BrainTap and working. And I said, let's set up a session for 6 weeks. And she says, well, I'm only going to live. I said, no, I want you from today on, every day is a celebration. She came in looking like she's already at her funeral. She's wearing all black and everything. So she comes back in 6 weeks later, looks like springtime. And I said, well, what'd they say at the John Hopkins? And she said, well, they said I was misdiagnosed. But and I've had that happen so many times because the body changes so quickly, and we have a thinking immune system. And so nowadays it's about the immune health. But I think we've seen all sorts of things that the body can do. I like to tell people, your brain is designed to heal. Your body is designed to heal, but you've got to deliver to it. You can't ask a master builder to build a house without any materials, and you can't, then that's the food part of it. You can't do it without a blueprint. Yeah. And then you can't do it without workers, so you need all these things to make it happen. And so many people just think, oh, I'm okay because as long as I catch it 10 years before I get to be 60 or 70 years old, I'm fine. But, the old adage is, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. So, I don't know anyone yet that I've met that on their deathbed go, you know what, that doing all those things was worth it. They always were kind of sad about the things they didn't do that they can't do anymore. Like, what would you pay for another day with your children or your parents or whoever that special person is, when you're on that deathbed. But people are so used to making immediately gratifying decisions instead of long-term beneficial decisions. That's what we're working with so many times. And that's where BrainTap comes in, because we're going to teach, the main thing I teach, there's a few things. Number one is long-term thinking. That you can have immediate gratification today as long as it meets with your long-term goals and, priorities. But if it's going to hurt you and take you off track, then it's not really, is it really worth 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it is of being drunk or whatever you're going to do you thought, no, I shouldn't do this, but no, I'm going to do it because I can just do it anyway. It's better to start saying no. In fact, a lot of people that have that kind of compulsion, I say, your rule is you have to say no 3 times before you can say yes. Yeah. And then they start because most people don't know how to say no. They know how to say yes. Right. And it's usually yes to all the bad things. They say no to all the good things for whatever reason. And this has something to do with neural pruning. Because what happens with neural pruning is you think, oh, I'm going to do this. And you get all excited. And those neuron connections have not been made. It's like running through a field with the grass is up to your shoulders. It's really hard to get through it. Yeah. But you got to get through that field many times before that grass grows down and you got a new trail. But then you go back and you redo the old program again. That revivifies that program. Those neurons get fired up again. They get strengthened. And that neural pruning takes over again. And that, even though there's that's why they say the road to hell is paved with great intentions, because everybody has great intentions, but it's really, what are you visualizing to realize? If you're not visualizing it, if you can't see yourself doing it yet, then you've got to keep faking it till you can make it, till you can actually believe it. because if not, it's just going to be, that's why so many people retire and expire too. They never thought beyond their job. Their job became their identity instead of having something to do afterwards. So, and you can see the people that live long, they're either doing something that brings them great pleasure or they're helping other people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I mean, you have so much wisdom. I feel like everything you just said, I mean, even this whole interview, but I mean, there's so much value in that because it's so multifaceted. It's having discipline, having an identity, like knowing who you are, being connected to purpose. Like it's all these different layers, right? And that's the key to longevity. Like if we're looking for a secret to living a long, full, healthy life, like that's it. It's just all of these different pieces of the puzzle put together. And we're so addicted to that dopamine of just, the reward center. Like, okay, well, I want this. I know that's going to make me feel good. So whether you're an online shopper and so it's just like add to cart. And I'm not judging you because I do that. I do it. That's why it was the first example I thought of because I'm probably the most guilty. But there are so many things, right? And we just they become behaviors and they become habits. And then it's what we then start to even think of as just our personality. Well, that's just who I am, and we start making excuses for it. But it's also, it's like there's such a physiologic and component of where it's like we're actually like baking that into the hardware of our body. And then we wonder why we can't undo it all. It's like it's so. I mean,
I always tell people, like, if you know Groucho Marx, if I was to say, might be dating myself a little bit, but they said, hey, if you were to play the role of Groucho Marx, what would you need to do? They go, oh, I get a cigar and I do my thing. I say, so you wake up every morning, you have that image of who you are. Yeah. Those habits and patterns are, like you said, they're baked in. They're hardwired. You don't even think about them anymore because it's your subconscious says, this is what we do. Well, don't worry about that. I'll do it for you. And so we have to actively, I always say, when you have conscious commitment, you get subconscious action. The subconscious doesn't do anything your conscious mind doesn't first approve of. That's why people can override even the greatest changes in the world because you can consciously make a choice to, eat poorly or not exercise or not think about healthy things. That's a choice.
Wow. I know this is going to be so helpful for our listeners because it's so helpful for me to be reminded of this too. And I love BrainTap and I want to make sure that everybody knows where they can access this. And if you are listening, like, Dr. Porter's talked a lot about, your lab and doing a lot of testing. But what's so cool is that he's developed this technology that you can do from home. Like this is very much something that you have access to. This is not like you don't need to go to his facility and spend $30,000 and like those things are always great to talk about, but that's just not that's not feasible for most people. So what I love is that you have this app. There are so many different ways that people can get plugged in and connected to using it. And then you can get the headset as a part of that as well. And again, like your whole family can benefit from it. So can you give our listeners kind of the rundown of, what it is, what it looks like to kind of get established with BrainTap, maybe like the first steps of connecting to your product and the app and everything else that goes with it?
Sure. I'm sure in the show notes, there's going to be a link that they can tap. They'll tap that link. It's going to take them to a 14-day trial. You can go there and just start the 14-day trial. And if you don't like it on day 13, cancel it. You won't be charged anything. It only charges on the 15th day. So you have that. That's the first thing. And we found that about 90% of people will start sleeping better that first night when they do that. So give that a shot. If you want to do the whole headset in that, there's a link for that too that you can go to, and you can do the headset and the app at the same time. I think instead of it being $1,007, you get $100 off on that. So that's on there too. And just follow the link and come on over and see it. And then, listen to the previous podcast if you're interested. But yes. The big thing with BrainTap is use it. Our average user, just so listeners know, our average user uses it 28 times a month. And they could use it up to 3 times a day, so they could use it 90 times a month if they wanted to. But they use it 28 times, and that's almost once a day. And we only have 1% of the people that join BrainTap ever quit. So once you join, people find a benefit because maybe their son or their daughter or their husband or wife, whatever it is, they can find a benefit with using it. So there's always somebody in the house that can use the stress reduction and the improvement, maybe in sports or in life.
Yeah. I mean, that the proof is in the pudding right there, because I mean, it speaks for itself. So I just love this work that you're involved in, and that you've really created something that a lot of people can see benefit. And obviously, like, there's been thousands of people whose lives have been affected by what you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you want the full story of BrainTap, it's really, really cool. That was on the first episode that we did. So we're going to pack the show notes full of all of the resources so you can get connected to Dr. Porter, BrainTap, our previous episode, and everything in between. But thank you so much for joining us today. This has just been such a pleasure. I've learned so much. I feel so encouraged. And like I said, you're such a light and there's so much wisdom in you. So thank you for being here with us for a part 2. And yeah, we'll make sure. I mean, I think that the development in this space just continues. So we'll make it an annual thing and bring you back.
There you go. Appreciate it. Love it. I love ancient health products too. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, for tuning in and listening today. If you loved this episode, like, subscribe, share, tag us over at the Health Institute. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode.